Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go.
Hello and welcome to today's DNS session. We are going to have a discussion on today's newspaper, The Hindu, Delhi edition dated 31st December 2021. We shall have discussion on articles important for the civil service examination and we shall discuss them as per the demand of the exam. There is an article on page number 3 of today's newspaper, the Delhi page, Landmark Court Rulings During the Pandemic. This article kind of summarizes the important or the landmark rulings, judgments of Delhi High Court. In one of its judgment, the Delhi High Court directed the Health Ministry to explore the option of crowdfunding to help 2 children suffering from rare disease to overcome the exorbitantly high price of medical or the healthcare. This judgment is important from various aspects and you can use this judgment in various contexts in your answer for the mains exam. First of all, you can treat this as an example of judicial activism. Judicial activism is a scenario where the courts, the judiciary, activate the executive into function. When the judgment came, there was a draft policy on rare disease. National Policy for Rare Diseases 2021 was not approved by the center then. And the earlier policy of 2017 was kept at abeyance on the pretext that a new policy is being formulated and finalized. So the governance in the area of rare disease had a complete vacuum. So in that scenario, the directive from the judiciary was important. The judgment is also important with regard to upholding the welfare nature of the Indian state. The draft policy, the National Policy for Rare Diseases 2021, has a section where government proposed crowdfunding for treatment of high-cost rare diseases. In the policy, the government accepts that in certain cases, government cannot fully finance the treatment because in case of rare diseases, the cost for the medical care goes extremely high. So the gap can be filled by seeking donations from prospective individuals or corporate donors. This provision in the policy strengthens the welfare nature of the Indian state, and judiciary once again stood up to uphold this welfare nature. The judgment is also important from the point of view of declaration of right to health and healthcare as a fundamental right by the Supreme Court. Right to health and healthcare has been recognized as part to right of life under Article 21. Right to life is an absolute right, and this absolute right of every individual has to be upheld. The court gave this directive to the ministry in spite the fact that the AIIMS doctor declared that even treatment might not be of much help for the children. But the court noted that the high cost of medicines should not be a reason to deny treatment to patients, especially children, in spite of the fact that the treatment has little chance to make their condition better. You can also look at this provision in the policy and this judgment from the point of view of fraternity, the social cohesion, the feeling of togetherness, the feeling of oneness, living together like different cells of an organism. That socio-political arrangement, or to say, to have fraternity in society. It's important that we come together and help each other. So this mechanism of crowdfunding for the purpose of healthcare of individuals also enforces the constitutional idea of fraternity. And to facilitate this thing, there is requirement of good governance and ethical governance. When ministry has to explore the option of crowdfunding, obviously this will be regulated. People will be more comfortable in contributing for crowdfunding if the fund is regulated, it is audited. So the value of society gets expressed in the process of governance, and good governance can become the norm in the process of governance. The article highlights another case where the court upheld the provision of CGST, the Central Goods and Service Tax, that gives power to authorities to arrest any person if there is a reason to believe that he has committed tax evasion. The previous case we saw can be seen as an example of judicial activism. If you have to give example of judicial restraint, you can use this example where the court upheld the provision of the law. The center has appraised the court of various bogus firms that fraudulently availed the IGST refunds and the ITC credits, and that has caused substantial loss to the exchequers. So being pragmatic, the court upheld the provision of central GST that gives power to the authorities to arrest any person if there is a reason to believe that he has committed tax evasion. There was a very famous judgment of Delhi High Court where it restrained a foreign court, the Wuhan Court. Wuhan Intermediate People's Court in September 2020 disallowed US firm Inter Digital Technology Corporation from pursuing a patent infringement case against a Chinese tech giant Xiaomi. The patent infringement case was going on in Indian court. So obviously a foreign court cannot direct a case to be held up in a sovereign nation. So the judgment of the Wuhan court cannot be allowed to be enforced in India. And further, as the case proceeded, the Delhi High Court gave judgment in favor of Inter Digital Technology Corporation of US. In this judgment, the Delhi High Court observed that right of a citizen for legal redressal and to ventilate his legitimate rights is hallowed, sacred, prominent, and fundamental in this country. Meaning, no court, a foreign court, any international court can debar a citizen from seeking justice from Indian court. There is one another very important judgment of Delhi High Court this year regarding rent payment for poor. The court declared that the promise or the assurance or the representation given by the Chief Minister clearly amounts to an enforceable promise, the implementation of which ought to be considered by the government. See, the background of this judgment is the Chief Minister of Delhi made some promises regarding payment of rent for the poor. In a press conference, he said that the landlords should not get rid of their tenants if the tenants are unable to pay the rent. And if the rent is not being paid out of poverty, then the compensation will be made to the landlords by the government. This announcement of Chief Minister was made in the wake of COVID-19 and the financial stress brought by the pandemic. But later, on this not getting implemented, the Delhi High Court said that the promise, assurances, and representation given by Chief Minister clearly amounts to an enforceable promise. See, there's a constitutional basis for this. You must have read for your prelims exam the parliamentary committees on assurance. There are parliamentary committees in the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha to check on the assurance given by the ministers on the floor of the House. Generally, during question hours, the ministers makes various assurance to the House. He also makes many promises on the floor of the House, sometimes on his own, sometimes on demand of the opposition. The promises, the assurances made on the floor of the House is considered as sacrosanct. And there's a special committee to check on those assurances, whether those promises, assurances were made good or not. So if the same constitutional principle is extended outside the House, announcement made by the ministers and chief ministers in press conferences should also be an enforceable promise. You can use this judgment in the context of probity. You can use this also in the context of honesty and truthfulness, integrity. You can use this also in the context of accountability. And you can use it in context of judicial activism and other areas that you can think of. There was a judgment of Delhi High Court this year concerning feeding of stray dogs. The court declared that every dog is a territorial being and therefore have to be fed and tended to at places where their territory was not frequented or less frequented. The court made it clear that people have right to feed dogs, street animals, and they have the right to be fed, they being a territorial being. But in the process of feeding stray dogs, other rights of people should not be hampered. So the dogs must be fed only at designated places, and that designated place can be decided by Animal Welfare Board of India in consultation with resident welfare associations. The court also gave the idea of forming guard and dog partnership. The court actually directed the resident welfare associations to form a guard and dog partnership in consultation with Delhi Police Dog Squad so that the dogs can be trained and can become partners of guards. As per the judgment, it shall be the obligation of every resident welfare association or the municipal corporation of the area to ensure that community dogs in those areas can have access to food, water in absence of caregivers. This is an example of various things. You can take this for judicial activism, you can take this for ethical governance, you can take this for biocentrism, you can take this for empathy, compassion. You can also take this as institutional measures. You can also see from here the importance of various institutions for the welfare of the vulnerables. For example, in this case, you have the code directives, which requires coordination of Resident Welfare Association, Delhi Police Dog Squad, Municipal Corporation, Animal Welfare Board of India. Delhi High Court this year also gave a judgment regarding virtual registration. The court ruled that marriages should be registered in the virtual presence of parties. The court was of the opinion that the universe has undergone a sea change in the last decade, but the registration authorities, while exercising their power and jurisdiction under the registration order, are refusing to recognize the reality. Today, web portals and video conferencing, they have become the norm. Had they not been the norm, then the court would have come to an absolute halt during the time of the pandemic. Citizens would have had no access to justice. This judgment is important from the point of view of good governance, from the point of view of e-governance. It is also important from the point of view of social issues. Online registration is not only convenient, but it is also safe in case of intercaste or interreligion or intersex, in case of intercaste or interreligion marriage. There is an article on page number 1, Parties Against Putting Off UP Election, says Chief Election Commissioner. See, amid rising cases of Omicron, concerns have been raised by Allahabad High Court on the conduct of election in the state, and the court has urged Prime Minister and the Election Commission to immediately ban rallies and public meetings of political parties and consider postponing the assembly election, as according to the court, it is more important to save lives. Taking note of the appeal of the Allahabad High Court, Election Commission has stated that all parties in Uttar Pradesh wants the assembly election to be held as per schedule or schedule. The Election Commission also has said that some political parties have expressed concern over flouting of COVID-19 rules of election rallies and hence sought curbs on the number of rallies. There are two things that you have to note for your exam concerning this news. Number one, Election Commission has said that it will execute the responsibility assigned to it as per the Constitution. So you have to understand what is the role of Election Commission in such a scenario where an emergency has come up, kind of emergency that was not anticipated during the formulation of Constitution. The term of the assembly is about to expire. An election needs to be conducted before the expiry. That is the constitutional mandate. Election Commission also has said that its responsibility kicks in only once the model code of conduct comes into effect. And that comes into effect as soon as the election dates are announced. Let's look at Article 83. What does it say? It says that the House of People, unless sooner dissolved, shall continue for 5 years from the date appointed for its first meeting, and no longer, meaning just 5 years, not more than that. And the expiration of the said period of 5 years shall operate as a dissolution of the House. So the House stands dissolved as soon as the 5-year period is completed, regardless of the fact whether the election has taken place or not. So to avoid the vacuum in governance, Election Commission is mandated to conduct the election before expiration of 5 years. But the said provision will not hold in case of an emergency. Article 83 says, provided that the said period may, while a proclamation of emergency is in operation, be extended by Parliament by law for a period not extending 1 year at a time and not extending in any case beyond a period of 6 months after the proclamation has ceased to operate. So in case of an emergency, the tenure of the House can be extended, but ordinarily it cannot. The same you will find in Article 172 with regard to state legislature. Every legislative assembly of every state, unless sooner dissolved, shall continue for 5 years from the date of appointment of its first meeting and no longer. and the expiration of the said period of 5 years shall operate as a dissolution of the assembly, provided that the said period may, while a proclamation of emergency is in operation, be extended. So, constitutionally speaking, there is no provision to extend the duration of Lok Sabha or the State Assembly unless proclamation of emergency under Article 352 is in operation. Completion of 5 years for both Lok Sabha as per Article 38(2) and for state legislature as per Article 172(1). So for both Lok Sabha and state legislature, the completion of 5 years operates as dissolution of the House. So House gets dissolved automatically as soon as 5 years is completed. And this essentially means that the Election Commission, by the operation of Article 324, must conduct elections so that a new government is elected on completion of the period of 5 years. This is where the Constitution stands. Now the question is, can emergency be imposed under Article 352 for COVID situation? Another question could be, can this constitutional provision be interpreted so that the reservoir of power that Article 324 gives to the Election Commission, the dates of election be extended? On the strict reading of Article 83(2) and 172(1), it is clear that the Constitution mandates the election for the Legislative Assembly to happen before completion of 5 years. And the completion of 5 years will operate as a dissolution of the House. The House will automatically get dissolved after completion of 5 years, unless there is an emergency. So it has become a big constitutional question as to whether the election dates can be extended in emergency like COVID-19 pandemic. Here I must also tell you what Supreme Court said in Mohinder Singh Gill case, which was then repeated in several other judgments of Supreme Court. The court said that Election Commission has residuary and plenary power under Article 324. In case where law is silent, Article 324 is a reservoir of power to act. Article 324 operates in areas left unoccupied by legislation. Presently, we do not have legislation on hate speech. So the Election Commission has taken various decisions in the previous elections on hate speech. There is no legislation regulating media. So Election Commission on its own, using its own wisdom, take decision on that. Election Commission also takes various decisions concerning the transfer of officers and various other administrative decisions. But the thing is, on the question of election date, the law is not silent. And the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, is very clear on that. Unless COVID-19 can be made to be accepted as a situation of emergency, and the state can proclaim emergency on the ground of COVID-19 pandemic. But yes, concerning the regulation during the time of election, putting curb on number of rallies, crowd management, for that Election Commission has residuary and plenary power under Article 324. Election Commission in the recent time has taken many bold decisions. In 1998, Election Commission prohibited newspapers and news channel from publishing results of pre-election surveys and exit polls during a certain period. Election Commission showed its guts and cheeks when it called the political parties for EVM hackathon. Recently, Election Commission has banned many prominent politicians from campaigning for certain period in the Lok Sabha election campaign. Election Commission very famously, you might remember, banned a biopic movie from release before the election. Election Commission recently also banned election campaign in Kolkata due to eruption of violence. Election Commission has come up with SWEEP, Systematic Voters Education and Electoral Awareness Program. Election Commission also has launched C-Vigil. It's a mobile application using which the citizens can inform of any mishaps happening during the time of election. Election Commission also has set up recently Media Certification and Monitoring Committee. Election Commission, barring few instances, has showed that it has the steel frame. It has integrity, it has courage to safeguard its credibility. And credibility of Election Commission is bedrock of democracy. So following the same tradition that Election Commission has followed ever since independence, this time around Election Commission can use its residuary and plenary power under Article 324 after the announcement of election date, after enforcement of Model Code of Conduct, and come up with some innovative and bold steps. For example, only e-campaigning be allowed. Maybe more use of internet and mobile phones and Twitter and other social media platforms. Physical campaigning can be limited or barred completely in the wake of emerging cases of Omicron variant of COVID-19 virus. There are some other important articles in today's newspaper as well. For example, there's one as the lead article on page number 6 in National Family Health Survey report card, The Good, the Sober, and the Future. This article makes some observation concerning National Family Health Survey 5 report. The same has been discussed very recently on 25th of November by Beswasa. The link to that DNS I shall provide in the description section. Similarly, there are other articles like Killing the License. This is concerning the regulation of NGOs by the Home Ministry. This issue has been discussed previously by Naveed sir, and the link for this again I'll put in the description section. There's also an article concerning conservation of endangered species via use of technology. This article concerns radio tagging of Indian pangolin. We have discussed this in the previous DNS, and the link to this shall also be there in the description section. Okay, now is the time to see how much you have grasped. Best would be if you give 2 minutes of time and speed attempt these 11 questions. And then you come for the discussion. The first statement is, right to health and healthcare is a fundamental right. This statement is absolutely correct. Not only right to health is fundamental right to health care is also a fundamental right. National Policy for Rare Diseases 2021 has the provision for crowdfunding. This is absolutely correct, a factual statement. This is an important provision of this upcoming policy. This policy has been approved by the ministry already, but the detailing as to how the regulation of crowdfunding will happen is yet to materialize. Central Goods and Services Tax gives power to authorities to arrest any person if there is a reason to believe that he has committed tax evasion. Based on suspicion, the arrest can happen. This is correct statement, and this provision has been upheld by the Delhi High Court. There has been many fake firms that has been misusing the refund provision under GST. So to arrest the misuse of the public fund, the provision has been upheld by the court. Committee on Government Assurances exists only in Lok Sabha and not in Raj Sabha. There is no reason for this committee to not exist in Raj Sabha because ministers can be from any houses, assurance can be given in any house, Prime Minister can give speech and assurance in any house. Both houses, in this sense, are on equal footing. So the statement has to be false. Committee on Government Assurance can make the assurance given by the ministers legally enforceable and can punish the concerned minister on failure to fulfill the promise of the assurance. Well, the committee exists to keep an account of the assurances or the promises or the representation given by the member of the House or the ministers. But you would understand it will be in no position to punish the concerned member. It's just to remind them. Statement obviously is incorrect. If a Lok Sabha is constituted on 18th May 2024, then it cannot function beyond 18th May 2029, meaning it ceased to exist, dead, at the completion of 5 years. See, the 16th Lok Sabha was constituted on 18th May 2014, but the administration of oath of the new members of the new Lok Sabha was done on 4th of June 2019. So till 3rd of June 2019, the same very Lok Sabha was operational. So it is not dead 5 years, absolutely, precisely. It is 5 years, but the Lok Sabha continues to exist beyond this time. But it does not take any major decision. It is just for administrative, it exists just for the sake of continuity. Supreme Court has said that Election Commission has residuary and plenary power under Article 324 in case where law is silent. This was in Mahendra Singh Gill case, and this is a very important case concerning Election Commission. The statement is factually correct. Duration of Houses of Parliament is mentioned in Article 82 of the Constitution. This is incorrect. You have to keep these things in mind for the prelims examination. The concerned article is 83. Date of enforcement of Model Code of Conduct is jointly decided by Home Ministry and Election Commission. The statement is absolutely incorrect. There is no say of Home Ministry in this. Election Commission is the sole authority to decide on the dates of election. and the moment the dates are announced, Model Code of Conduct comes into force. Indian pangolins are critically endangered species. There's an article in today's newspaper concerning Indian pangolins. The statement is false. Indian pangolins are endangered. Chinese pangolins are critically endangered. Now you have question of the day of yesterday and the answer to it, and the last question of the day for this year. Please attempt the question, post your answer in the comment section. Also in the comment section, post the marks that you obtained in the speed test. Participate, have some meaningful discussion, and make the most out of this DNS session. For more practice, you can also attempt the DNS quiz on the ELEARN platform. Goodbye, take care, and Happy New Year.